There is one sentence that, when you finally say it and truly mean it, can change everything. Not because the words themselves are magical, but because of who you have become by the time you are able to say them. It no longer comes from desperation, fear, or a need to convince someone. It comes from a place inside you that has finally become strong enough to stand on its own. That is the person the narcissist never expected you to become. They may have spent years slowly breaking down your confidence, your identity, your instincts, and your trust in yourself. They may have tried to make you question what you saw, what you felt, and even who you were, but despite everything they did not completely destroy you. Before we get to that sentence, there is something you need to understand. What you experienced was not simply a difficult relationship. It was not just poor communication, incompatibility, or a temporary rough period. When narcissistic abuse is present, the gradual destruction of another person's confidence can become a deeply damaging pattern, whether the behavior is conscious, unconscious, or somewhere in between. And if hearing that makes something inside you shift, stay with me. Because this channel, Narcissist Recovery, is about going beyond empty encouragement and shallow advice. It is about understanding the psychology behind narcissistic abuse, recognizing the lies it teaches you to believe, and rebuilding the clarity that was taken from you. If that is the kind of truth you have been searching for, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the more clearly you understand these patterns, the harder they become to use against you. Now let's talk about what a narcissistic person actually fears, because this is where many people misunderstand the situation. Some believe the narcissist is most afraid of being exposed. They think that if they reveal enough evidence, tell enough people, or confront them at exactly the right moment, everything will finally fall apart. Others believe the narcissist fears anger. They think that if they become louder, tougher, or more aggressive, the narcissist will finally retreat. And after being pulled through years of emotional confusion, some people come to believe the narcissist's greatest fear is losing them. They begin measuring their own worth by how desperately the narcissist tries to pull them back. But there is something far more threatening to a narcissistic person. It is not your anger. It is not your confrontation. It is not even your exposure. It is your independence from their version of reality. What becomes extremely difficult for them to control is someone who no longer needs their approval to know what is true. Someone who trusts their own perception again. Someone whose inner sense of reality has become so grounded that manipulation, guilt, charm, rage, or confusion can no longer easily knock them off balance. That is the person they cannot easily control. And there is a huge difference between saying, "I'm done," while secretly hoping they chase you, and actually being done. Real detachment is quieter. You do not need to prove that you are finished. You do not need one final argument. You do not need them to understand your pain. You simply reach a point where their ability to disturb your inner world begins to disappear. You have chosen yourself so completely that there is no longer the same emotional space for them to occupy. To understand why this can be so threatening, you also have to stop relying on the stereotypical image of narcissism. Not every narcissistic person is loud, arrogant, or constantly demanding attention. Some can be charming, gentle, generous, thoughtful, and incredibly attentive. Some know exactly how to make you feel uniquely important, especially in the beginning. Others constantly position themselves as the wounded one. They become the person who was supposedly mistreated by everyone before you, the person who only needs someone to finally love them properly, the person whose behavior always has an explanation, an excuse, or someone else to blame. And sometimes they look exactly like the person you fell in love with. That is what makes it so confusing. But beneath these different presentations can be a deeper pattern, difficulty recognizing another person as fully autonomous, with feelings, needs, boundaries, and a reality that exists independently of them. You were supposed to fit a role. You were supposed to respond the way they wanted. You were supposed to provide something they needed. And when you stopped playing that role, the relationship could suddenly feel very different. Instead of accepting your individuality, they may have responded with punishment, withdrawal, blame, guilt, rage, or emotional manipulation. So ask yourself something honestly. When did they genuinely celebrate your success without turning it back toward themselves? When did they sit with your pain without making your suffering about their own? When did you express a boundary and have it respected simply because it belonged to you? Not because they agreed with it, not because they understood it, but because you were allowed to have one. These questions are not meant to reopen your wounds. They are meant to help you see what you may have been trained to overlook, because sometimes recovery begins with something very simple, finally trusting what your own experience has been telling you. I am asking you these questions because I need you to look at your experience with clear eyes. Clarity is not cruelty. Sometimes clarity is the first step towards survival. The pattern of narcissistic control rarely appears all at once. In the beginning, it often starts with mirroring. They seem to become exactly what you have been looking for. They share your interests, echo your values, understand your wounds, and make you feel as though someone has finally seen you in a way nobody else ever could. And sometimes this process is not entirely deliberate. Some narcissistic people may genuinely believe in the identity they are presenting during those early stages, but there is a painful possibility you eventually have to face. Much of what you fell in love with may have been a reflection of you. You connected with the version of them that seemed perfectly matched to your hopes, values, and emotional needs. Then the mirror began to crack. The colder behavior appeared, the dismissiveness, the cruelty, the denial, the moments that left you questioning your own memory, and your mind did something completely understandable. It tried to protect the original image. You told yourself, that isn't really who they are. Maybe they're stressed, maybe they're afraid, maybe their childhood damaged them, maybe I did something wrong. That is when the internal battle began. You were caught between what you experienced and what you were being told had happened, between what you felt and what you were expected to feel, between the person you once knew yourself to be and the person you were gradually being pressured to become. Psychology describes this conflict as cognitive dissonance, and it can become a powerful part of an abusive dynamic. The person does not have to physically restrain you to influence you. Confusion can become the restraint. Warmth followed by withdrawal, praise followed by punishment, intense closeness followed by inexplicable coldness. Your nervous system starts reacting to the unpredictability. Instead of feeling secure, you become hyper-focused on figuring everything out. You analyze their tone, their messages, their moods, and your own behavior. You begin wondering what you need to say, change, or become to bring back the person you met in the beginning. But here's the painful truth. You may be chasing a version of them that was never sustainable in the first place. You keep auditioning for a role in a relationship where your well-being was never truly the priority. Gaslighting is a word almost everyone recognizes now, but its deeper impact is often misunderstood. It is not always about denying one particular event. Sometimes it gradually attacks your confidence in your entire perception of reality. Your feelings become too much. Your needs become unreasonable. Your memory becomes wrong. Your intuition becomes paranoia. Your boundaries become attacks. Your anger becomes proof that you are unstable. Little by little, you begin handing someone else the authority to define your reality. Instead of asking yourself what you think, you start asking what they think. Instead of trusting your emotions, you wonder whether they will approve of them. Instead of deciding what is acceptable to you, you start calculating what they will tolerate. And if you have experienced that, I want you to understand something important. You did not suddenly become weak. You did not lose your mind. You did not become incapable of thinking for yourself. You were repeatedly conditioned to doubt the very instincts that were supposed to protect you. There is also a concept known as trauma bonding, and it is often misunderstood. When periods of emotional pain are repeatedly followed by relief, affection, reassurance, or temporary closeness, the nervous system can become intensely attached to the cycle itself. That attachment is not proof that you are foolish, it is not proof that you lacked intelligence, and it is not simply a matter of having low self-esteem. Your brain responds strongly to unpredictable rewards. When pain and comfort become connected, the relief can feel extraordinarily powerful because your nervous system has been waiting for it. That is why so many survivors torture themselves with questions like, why did I stay? Why did I go back? Why did I defend someone who was hurting me? The answer is not that there was something fundamentally defective about you. A powerful psychological pattern had developed. Understanding that does not remove your responsibility for what you choose today. Instead, it gives you the knowledge needed to stop repeating what happened yesterday. And that knowledge becomes your foundation. Brick by brick, you begin rebuilding the boundaries, self-trust, identity, and inner stability that were gradually weakened. That is what narcissist recovery is here for. Not to give you temporary comfort, but to help you understand the patterns deeply enough that you can begin changing your relationship with yourself. If you have not subscribed yet, join this community, turn on notifications, and stay connected to these conversations about narcissistic abuse, emotional manipulation, trauma bonds, boundaries, and psychological recovery. Because eventually, after enough confusion, enough pain, and enough honest self-reflection, something begins to change. You reach a moment of reclamation. And when that moment arrives, you realize that the person you have been fighting to recover was never truly gone. It was you, and now you are finally coming back. After enough reading, enough reflection, enough therapy, and enough nights spent sitting alone with the reality of what happened, something eventually changes. The moment looks different for everyone, but eventually you stop trying to repair them. You stop trying to make them understand your pain. You stop waiting for the apology, the accountability, or the moment of sincere remorse you deserved but may never receive. You stop needing them to validate what you already know. Instead, you begin standing firmly inside your own reality. And when that happens, the dynamic changes in a way a narcissistic person may find extremely difficult to tolerate. Control depends on your emotional involvement. Your fear, your anger, your hope, your love, your frustration, and especially your desire for closure can all keep you psychologically connected. As long as you are reacting, they still have access to your attention. Even anger can become engagement. Even arguing can become engagement. Even repeatedly explaining yourself can become engagement. Your reaction tells them they still occupy emotional space inside you. That is why the cycle can continue. They provoke, withdraw, return, create confusion, and sometimes repeat the same pattern after you have already tried to walk away. But when your reaction genuinely disappears, the dynamic begins to lose its fuel. You cannot easily manipulate someone who no longer needs your approval. You cannot control someone who has stopped being terrified of losing you. And this is where you need to understand something else. Cruelty is not the same thing as strength. The arrogance, rage, manipulation, contempt, and emotional games may look powerful from the outside, but underneath them can exist tremendous insecurity and fear. Narcissistic defenses often develop around a fragile sense of self and an inability to tolerate shame, rejection, vulnerability, or feelings of inadequacy. That does not excuse the damage they caused. Understanding the psychology behind harmful behavior does not mean you have to tolerate it. It simply helps you stop confusing someone's defenses with your worth. The rage was not proof that you were insignificant. The contempt was not proof that you were unworthy. The silent treatment was not proof that you had failed. The charm was not proof that you were finally safe. These behaviors were about their internal world, not an accurate measurement of yours. And because you were capable of loving deeply, empathizing, understanding, and seeing beneath the surface, you may have entered that relationship believing that if you loved them sincerely enough, they would eventually feel safe enough to become whole. You offered acceptance. You offered understanding. You gave them opportunities to be known without having to pretend they were perfect. But you could not heal something they were unwilling or unable to confront within themselves. And that was never because you did not give enough. You were not supposed to sacrifice yourself until another person finally learned how to receive love. Understanding this gives you something incredibly valuable: distance. You can stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" You can stop measuring yourself against their distorted perception of you. You can stop looking at yourself through the eyes of someone who could not consistently recognize your humanity. Instead, you begin rebuilding your own reflection. Every piece of yourself you recover becomes evidence that you survived. Your confidence, your intuition, your boundaries, your voice, your identity. None of those things disappeared forever. They were buried beneath everything you had been trying to survive. And now we arrive at the sentence. Notice how we got here. Not through revenge, not through confrontation, not through finding the perfect words that will finally destroy their ego. We arrived here through understanding, through truth, through slowly becoming certain about what happened and who you are now. Because this sentence only carries meaning when it comes from genuine inner peace. If you say it from anger, you are still emotionally connected. If you say it from pain, you are still asking them to recognize your pain. If you say it as a strategy to make them chase you, you are still playing the same game. But when you can say it without needing any reaction from them, everything changes. The sentence is simple. I no longer need anything from you. Not, I'm finished with you, because that can still carry the emotional weight of a battle. Not, I hate you, because hatred still creates a powerful connection, and you do not even need to announce, I forgive you. Forgiveness, when it comes, does not require their permission or their applause. It can exist quietly within you. I no longer need anything from you. That is not revenge. That is not punishment. That is not a performance. It is the quiet declaration of someone who has finally stopped looking outside themselves for what they can now give themselves. Whatever words feel natural to you, the meaning remains the same. And when you genuinely reach that place, the narcissist may recognize something they cannot easily manipulate. You are no longer emotionally dependent on them. Not rejection that still carries anger. Not leaving while secretly hoping they will chase you. Not hatred that keeps you emotionally connected, but genuine indifference. The quiet realization that they are no longer necessary in your life. You have become someone they cannot easily control because there is no longer an emotional wound they can repeatedly exploit. There is no desperate hope they can use as bait. There is no fear they can activate whenever they want your attention. You have looked honestly at the entire relationship, understood what happened, and begun walking away without needing revenge. You are simply choosing yourself. And people who truly recover from narcissistic abuse do not necessarily become colder or harder. They become wiser. They become more discerning. They learn to recognize the difference between love that strengthens you and attachment that slowly consumes you. They learn the difference between someone who simply mirrors their personality and someone who genuinely understands them. And something else develops inside them, a quiet authority. Not arrogance, not emotional hardness, just the calm confidence of someone who has walked through an extremely dark chapter and discovered that they were still there at the end of it, still breathing, still capable of loving, still worthy, still themselves. You were never someone who needed to be rescued. Your empathy, loyalty, emotional depth, and ability to devote yourself deeply were never defects. Those qualities may have been taken advantage of, but that does not make them weaknesses. In fact, they are some of the most valuable parts of who you are. The lesson is not that you should become heartless so nobody can hurt you again. The lesson is that you can remain compassionate while becoming more discerning about who receives access to that compassion. They may have tried to take your confidence, your peace, your identity, and your ability to trust yourself, but they did not erase you. You survived. That is the real story. Not that you failed. Not that you were foolish. Not that you were somehow less intelligent for loving someone who hurt you. Your light survived the experience, and that sentence we have been building toward is not a weapon meant to destroy them. It is a declaration you make to yourself. I see clearly now. I understand what happened. I know who I am. I know what I deserve, and I no longer need you to agree with any of it. That is freedom. The stability beneath your feet did not come back because someone finally apologized. It came back because you rebuilt it yourself, choice by choice, boundary by boundary, truth by truth, morning by morning. There were probably days when simply getting out of bed felt like an achievement. Days when continuing forward required more strength than anyone around you realized. You built yourself back during those moments. And what you built now belongs to you. No person's charm can take it. No rage can take it. No manipulation can take it. No manufactured chaos can take it. The narcissistic person may have wanted you to function as a mirror, to reinforce their image, absorb their emotional chaos, carry their shame, and constantly reassure them without asking for anything that threatened their sense of control. They may have believed you would remain inside that role forever, but they encountered something they did not expect, a real person. And when a person stops being controlled by fear, stops doubting their own perception, and stops needing another person to become the version they once believed them to be, that person becomes incredibly difficult to manipulate. That is who you are becoming now. Not someone who needs to punish them, not someone who needs to prove anything, someone who has finally reached the other side of the experience with a deeper understanding of themselves. You can stand in your own life without needing their validation. You can move forward without their love. You can heal without their apology. You can find closure without their explanation. You can let go without getting the final word. You can simply reach the place where there is nothing left that you need from them. That is the freedom. That is the sentence. And perhaps the most powerful part is that you may already be living it. If these words have given language to something you have struggled to explain, stay connected to Narcissist Recovery. Subscribe and share this with someone who may need to hear it. Because recovering from narcissistic abuse is not about becoming the person you were before. It is about becoming someone who understands their own worth so deeply that they can no longer be convinced to abandon themselves for another person's approval. You are still becoming that person, and everything you need to continue that journey is already within you.